everyone, I'm Kathleen O'Connell, National Education Director for the New York Times. Welcome to the New York Times and Education webcast on civic engagement. We would love to have you join the conversation. Simply type your questions into the space provided and I will relay those to our speaker. We're pleased to have Jennifer Preston with us today. Jennifer is a reporter at the Times covering the intersection of social media, politics, government, business, and real life. Thanks for being here, Jennifer. To start things off, what does civic engagement mean to you?
I think civic engagement means many things to many different people, and to me it means a lot more than just going to the polls on election day. Civic engagement means letting your elected official know that there's a pothole that just destroyed your car. Civic engagement means, for many young people today, letting elected officials know your concern about student loans and student debt, or university officials about tuition increases. So civic engagement means getting involved and using your voice to make an impact and drive change. And what we're going to talk about today is how social media tools have played a very important role in the last 5, 6, 7 years in civic engagement, from promoting democracy to letting local officials know about local concerns like that pothole, to letting groups know that people are unhappy about decisions that have been made, and letting them know by making their voices heard using Facebook and Twitter and other social tools. So first, just to give you a little background about how I became interested and involved in social media. I was named the newsroom's first social media editor almost 5 years ago, and in that role, my job was to identify the value of these tools for New York Times journalism. And in that, I found these tools were enormously effective for reporting, for real-time publishing, for helping our journalists engage with our readers. And then I used my knowledge of how these tools worked to report and write stories about how social media was changing almost everything around us. And my first assignment was the Arab Spring in January of 2011. So later in the broadcast, I'm going to tell you the behind-the-scenes story of how Facebook played a very important role in getting people to Tahrir Square on January 25th. And it wasn't because someone, like many of you, I'm sure, created an event on Facebook for a party or for a protest. So we'll be sharing that story with you later. Also, another example of how social media tools are being used on campuses today to promote a very important conversation about race. Just a few days ago, my colleague Tanzina Vega wrote about microaggressions and wrote about the campaign at the University of Michigan and also at Harvard, where students are using Twitter and Facebook to voice their concerns and to get a very important conversation going about race. And also, civic engagement, again, it's more than just engaging elected officials. It's when people use these tools to bring their voices together to bring about change. And another example of that would be the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Just a couple of years ago, the Susan G. Komen Foundation, which does very important work for breast cancer research and raises lots of money for breast cancer research and other services, cut funding to Planned Parenthood centers that were providing breast cancer screenings. So the response to this decision was a huge backlash where women all over the country came together on Facebook and Twitter to voice their concerns about that decision. And because of the uproar on these social platforms over that decision, the foundation changed its mind and restored funding for those breast cancer screenings. So social media tools proved to be a very effective way for people from all over the country and all over the world to voice their concerns about the Susan G. Komen Foundation's decision. There was such an outcry that the foundation changed its decision. Another example of how social media tools have played a very important role in civic engagement is in Syria. As many of you know, there has been a civil war, terrible conflict. Thousands of people have lost their lives there in the last couple of years. Because of the situation, we have been unable to get reporters consistently to report from inside the country because of restrictions there on press freedom. However, many of the activists and many of the rebels have used YouTube and have used video shot from cell phones and video that was shot with quite professional cameras to tell the story of what is happening in that country, and then using Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube to get the images and videos of what's been happening on the ground out to the world. So at the New York Times, what we created was a feature called Watching Syria's War, where we post videos that are created from inside the country. But what we do is, in addition to tell you what we know about the video, we tell you what we don't know about the video. My editor, Ian Fisher, was one of the people behind this project. He thought it was very important that we help tell the story of what is unfolding inside Syria, and that means telling our readers what we know and what we don't know. So, turning to some of the research that has been done in this arena, I'd like to share with you some research that was done last year by the Pew Research Internet Project that took a look at civic engagement in the digital age. The Pew Foundation looked at what impact social media was having on political engagement, on political campaigns. And what they found was that 39% of Americans performed some sort of political activity on a social networking site in 12 months prior to the survey, which was completed just last year. So when you think about it, Facebook didn't even exist a decade ago. Twitter didn't exist 8 years ago. So in a very short amount of time, people have been using these tools to get conversations going and raising awareness around specific issues. So what Pew also found was that 63% of political social networking users had recently got involved in a political activity or group, such as attending a political meeting or working with fellow citizens to solve a problem in their community. So many people will say, well, just because you say something on Twitter, is that really going to lead to direct action? And what many organizers have found is that these tools are very powerful tools for organizing people, for organizing conversation. But what they have also found is for true change to take place, you need to connect that to a real action on the ground. So let's go back to January 25th, 2011, Tahrir Square in Egypt, which all of you have heard about, the Twitter revolution, the Facebook revolution. So how did that really unfold using Facebook? The story is fascinating. It did not happen because someone posted a Facebook event a few weeks before and say, hey everybody, let's all gather in Tahrir Square on January 25th and express to the government our frustration and anger and concern about how this government, has restricted our freedom for 30 years. How Facebook played an important role in getting people to Tahrir Square happened actually the June before. And how it happened is this. That June, there was a young man in his late 20s who was killed by two police officers because the police officers believed that he had taken a cell phone video of them involved in a drug deal. And they wanted that cell phone video. They were very concerned he was going to use that cell phone video to implicate them. So what they did was they beat him badly. They beat him to death. They told his mother, however, that he died because he had choked on drugs. They claimed that he had been using drugs and he died while they were trying to arrest him because he choked on the drugs. However, it was a cell phone photo of this young, handsome man's battered and beaten face that was taken by someone in the morgue and posted on Facebook. That is really how Facebook became a major player in getting people to Tahrir Square the following January in 2011. So what happened was this young man's death outraged not only his family and friends in this small town in Egypt. Using Facebook, they used Facebook to generate an entire conversation about police abuse in Egypt. And they highlighted this young man's story, and they posted silent protests about his death from all over the country. And every single time that another young person was beaten by police under suspicious circumstances, the victim story was told on this Facebook page. The name of the Facebook page is We Are All Khalid Saeed, and that is the name of the young man who was killed that night. And that Facebook page had hundreds of thousands of people who were involved in this conversation about police abuse in Egypt, so that when events were unfolding in Tunisia, when people were also using Facebook and YouTube and Twitter to communicate concerns in nearby Tunisia, this Facebook page became, the newspaper became the vehicle for conversation and for change in Egypt in January of 2011. So as it turns out, January 25th was Police Day in Cairo, and the Facebook page was used to gather protesters for Police Day, to object to police abuses. And that's how Facebook played such an important role at the very beginning of the Arab Spring. So I'd love to hear your conversations, and I'd love to hear examples on your campuses where you have seen social media tools play a role in civic engagement and in conversation around important issues.
Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, we have a question. Do you think social media can go too far in civic engagement? Is there a fine subtle line of going too far?
Yeah, I would love to hear from the person who asked their question if there's a specific case that they have in mind. But I do think that there are very serious privacy concerns about the use of social tools, and everyone who uses them needs to be mindful of privacy and not violating other people's privacy, because that does not promote a civic engagement, a civil civic engagement effort. One example that I have heard students talk about recently in this discussion of using social media around the very important discussion of race on college campuses. Some people feel that they have been targeted, that they had attended a party, and this is certainly not in many of the cases where we have seen students, show up in most inappropriate garb and making comments. But some people have complained that they have been unfairly targeted because of what they were wearing or what they said because of social media. But the beauty of social media is that people can respond, and you can have a conversation, and using these conversations in positive ways is what's really important.
Okay, thank you. Another question. What value does civic engagement have for college students personally, academically, and for their future careers?
Well, I think that civic engagement needs to be part of everyone's life, and more than just every 4 years when there's a presidential election. Before working in digital media and social media, I spent most of my life as a reporter. I was the City Hall bureau chief in New York City. I was the State House bureau chief in New Jersey. And so I saw up close that a lot of decisions are being made by a very small group of people, and another very small group of people influencing many of those decisions, because they have two things: access and money. And there are too many important decisions being made that affect you, that affect your lives, that affect your future, that cannot and should not be made without your voice. So again, I think turning to these tools, what we've seen happen with online petitions and change.org, and even with so many governments, local government, the federal government, state governments, mayors, presidents, whitehouse.gov, inviting people into the conversation, inviting you to weigh in, or starting your own campaign using these tools.
Okay, we have another question.
Yes.
Do you think it's feasible for colleges to unite and create a universal civic engagement site for discussion?
I think that is a brilliant idea, a fabulous idea, and I would love for the person who proposed that question to send me an email, jepresto@nytimes.com. And if anyone has additional questions after this webcast, please feel free to send me an email, and I will do my best to answer them. But I think that is a absolutely fantastic idea, and one that I'm sure other folks on this webcast would be interested in joining you in.
Great, and I'm looking if we have any additional questions. And I think we are good. So thank you so
Great.
much, Jennifer. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. I just also wanted to add, if people also wanted to ask questions on Twitter, my handle is @JenniferPreston on Twitter. So please feel free to @reply me and pose your question, and we'll get it answered. Thank you.